welcome to edition 11 of All Killa, No Filla podcast with me, Rachel Fairburn, and Kiri, Pritchard, McLean. Just before we start, we'll do our usual disclaimer. We're just chatting about murders because we're interested in them. We're fascinated by serial killers. We're not advocating what anyone does, and we're not inciting you to go out and do anything. And as long as we do this podcast, it stops us from writing to them in prison.
Episode 11.
Episode 11. It's a gory one.
Yeah, it's a bit... Well, it's not gory like Dharma's gory, but it's like... It's
depressing gory.
Everything is horrible, isn't it? Yeah. Childhood, everything. So we're gonna do a double whammy, which occasionally we do. We're gonna do Henry Lee Lucas, allegedly one of the most prolific serial killers in America, but we've got lots to say on that.
Yeah, we've got a lot to say about that.
And Ottis Toole.
Ottis Toole.
Who is his gay lover. And they went on a little spree together. So we're going to start with Henry Lee Lucas, because he's sort of the most famous one.
Yeah. One-eyed drifter. Born in there.
That sounds delicious, mate.
Oh, yeah.
Like the mint drifter.
Oh, yeah. It's like a spin-off. Born in 23rd of August 1936 in Blacksburg, Virginia, to his mother, obviously, Viola, which is a very nice name.
Oh, God, the names in this family are gorgeous. It's just a shame that everything else was so fucked up.
His father was called No Legs.
His name is Anderson, but his name was No Legs because he had, wait for it, no legs. And it was very much say what you see.
Hey, no legs.
Basically, he was an alcoholic strap in for this. This is pretty brutal. Don't eat while you're listening to this. He was an alcoholic that fell over on the train tracks. A train went over and cut his legs off. That's fucking horrible, isn't it? It's like something from Saw.
Oh, it's awful.
And his mum, Viola, was a violent prostitute that used to bring her customers home and would have sex in front of Henry Lee and the other kids, and also old No Legs propped in the corner, and was really violent towards all of them as well.
Well, there's an incident where she gave Henry a good old beating, and he was out cold for 3 days after it.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Do not piss Viola off.
No, she sounds fucking mental. Also, his dad used to make moonshine, and Henry Lee would be responsible for giving it a stir and things like that. And in return, he'd give him a little taste. And he was because of this, he was an alcoholic by the time he was 10. And that's not just any old... That's not hooch alcoholic. That's moonshine. He's basically been drinking like paint stripper and ethanol since he was 10 years old.
Oh.
No Legs actually came to a bit of a sticky end. He died because he was pissed and he fell out of his chair in the snow and he got pneumonia and died out there.
Bloody hell.
Fucking No Legs.
No legs. If
no
only
clue.
he had his legs, none of this would have happened. So depressing, isn't it?
It's really depressing.
Henry lost his eye as well in a fight with his brother when he was, I think he was 10 years old.
Yeah.
Is that it? And Viola was, well, she wasn't very compassionate about this, was she? Because she left the eye to get infected.
Yeah, 3 days before they did anything about it.
And then it was too late.
Yeah, apparently it withered up, like Gabrielle. Only he didn't get a jewel-encrusted eye patch. Or some #1 singles. Also, apparently, there's a rumour that one of No Legs' mates gave Henry a mule, and Viola's like, oh, you like that mule, do you? And she just shot it in front of him. So she was just obviously completely fucked in the head.
Cruel.
Yeah, so what you've got there is like a family with a really perverse way of looking at sexual contact and really violent. Like, it's just the recipe for a serial killer. And he killed someone who was quite young, wasn't he? Was he 15?
Yeah, I think he was, 14 or 15 in 1951. He said he killed Laura Burnsley, who had, sort of refused his sexual advances.
Yeah.
But he later retracted this confession later on.
Yeah, this becomes a popular theme for him. Unfortunately, he doesn't retract the right things, which are his penis, away from an innocent girl. He only does it with confessions. And then he moved to live with his half-sister Opal. Again, another beautiful name.
Yeah, it had served 4 years in prison, though, just for burglary and things like that.
Classic petty criminal.
Bit of petty crime and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, Opal, lovely name.
Yeah. So moved to live with Opal, and then his mum comes crashing back into the scene. He'd sort of got himself a bit settled here. He had a fiancé, and then his mum was like, I don't like your fiancé, you need to come and move back and live with me. So she's just sort of bossing him around again. And, well, to me, that's, like, fucking bizarre, because, like, you've got an alcoholic, aggressive prostitute mother who had a husband with no legs. and she's saying that your fiance isn't good. Like, how fucking bad is that fiance? They'd be like, no son of mine's gonna go with that hussy.
Her dresses are too short. She's no good for you.
She got 2 legs, I'm not interested. But then Viola kind of gets a comeuppance.
Oh, well. It was the 11th of January 1960. And whilst arguing, because what happened was Viola wanted Henry to move back to Virginia from Michigan to come and care for her because she was getting a bit older. And he was like, I don't want to, I want to stay here and marry my fiancé. Anyway, they're having this ongoing row, and Henry kills his mother.
Stabbed her, apparently. Well, apparently they'd been out drinking, had argued, and he fell asleep, and he woke up and she was beating him with a broom.
What? Right, I'm going to say right now, how many times do brooms feature in our podcast? We've had Peter Curtin, something happened with him and a broom, I seem to remember that.
Dharma was beaten to death with a broom.
I'm
sure Ted Bundy, there was a broom thing with him as well.
Something's gone on. Total broomatics. Oh, so sorry.
That's a sweeping generalisation.
These brooms are just... I just love the fact that people are hitting... It's like Tom and Jerry. Hitting each other with brooms all the time. Oh my God.
It's a very Acme way of doing it, isn't it? She started beating him up with a broom and he just went spare and stabbed her in the neck. Ooh. And then apparently he later on said that he had sex with her dead body.
It sounds like something he'd do.
It does, doesn't it? It's not like out the realms of possibility. Like, that doesn't sound like you, Henry.
Yeah, well, this is actually weird because she wasn't dead when he thought she was dead. So that's one in his good eye for him, innit? But she, apparently the sister came home and found her in a pool of blood, but it was too late. She died of heart failed because she had no blood left.
Fuck.
Killed his own mother, which he went to prison for.
Yeah, well, he stole a car and he drove to Virginia.
Yeah, which, right, Henry, you've been arguing with your mother because you don't want to go back to Virginia. You kill your mother and you go back to Virginia. This could have been avoided.
But he went back to Virginia and they went, oh no, actually I'm going to go back to Michigan. So drove back, but they had already arrested him in Ohio by that time for this. And he pleaded that it was self-defence. So he served about 10 years and then he was released due to overcrowding. I don't know how, out of all the people you're going to pick to let go, no, you didn't pay your TV licence, you're staying where you are. You one-eyed mental, did go on and roam the streets. Because he was really shortly after that, he was arrested again for another sort of 5 years, wasn't he?
Yeah, he attempted to abduct 3 girls, apparently.
Yes, he came up to them and was doing... It's all very vague. This is a really weird one, isn't it? We were talking about this. That the crimes with everyone else are really specific. You know what they'd eaten before and all this.
You've got dates, you've got everything. Yeah. This is all like, oh yeah, and then he did this, but...
And then he might have done this to a girl. There's rarely names.
It's very, very strange. And when you watch documentaries, it's always police officers and then, a woman who was married to him for a bit. There's not really many people...
To do things differently down south, don't they?
Oh, without a doubt.
So he came up to these 3 girls and then something happened where they ended up shouting rape and a load of people came
Something
along.
Wasn't retracted, let's put it that
way. He then moved in, he sort of settled down for a bit, didn't he, with a woman and her kid?
He did, yeah, and this is when it was a friend of the family, a single mother who was married, and they were settled for a bit and everything was alright until, well, it all kicks off again, doesn't it, because... One of the kids saying he's been abusing me, and then there's a really horrible incident where he's been beating the woman, and she leaves, doesn't she?
She does a runner to her family.
But leaves a baby behind.
But leaves the baby, yeah. So then turns up at her family's house and is like, listen, he's been knocking 7 shades. Because she went to leave and he went, you're not leaving, and pulled a butcher's knife on her. And she was like, okay, I'm going to stay for a while then.
Maybe he's just going to cook her a really nice meal.
You're not saying, I've worked ages on this lobster bisque, there's no way you're fucking off now. And then when his back was turned, she did a runner, but left the baby behind, got to the family and was like, listen, all this horrible shit's been happening, but the baby's still there. So the family go over with pitchforks and stuff and we're like, what's this, what you've been hearing? And he turns up and he's holding the baby and he's like, no, she's absolutely mental. And they're like, yeah, women are mental, aren't they? And they take his side.
Even though he's killed his own mother.
Even though he's been prosecuted for killing his own mother. And it looks like attempted rape of 3 little girls. That they go, yeah, no, she is flighty, isn't she? Bitches
be crazy.
And then it wasn't until the other kid said, no, he's been sexually abusing me, that they were like, oh, okay. And then he does a bunk again.
But this is where he meets Ottis Toole. It was, what year was it? 82.
It's weird because there's again, it's all very vague. He basically drifted around the south of America, and they think he met Ottis somewhere between 76 and 78.
Yeah, and they start this, like, romantic affair.
Yeah,
slightly.
This weird kind of... It's kind of like natural born killers, that they basically go on this weird spree just driving around.
And they met in a soup kitchen, didn't they?
Yeah, that's lovely.
Sex in the soup kitchen. That's lovely, isn't it?
And then everything was fine between them. And when I say fine between them, I mean they were murdering people. Until Ottis took custody of his niece and his nephew. His niece was called Frida Powell, but she was known as Becky, and that was partly to hide her identity. She was 12 at the time, and Henry Lee Lucas started a relationship with her. Apparently she was, as the American police officer put it very kindly, retarded.
Yeah, I mean, that is... one of the documentaries, he's so cruel. He's like, she was retarded.
Yeah, like it's the playground.
He kept saying it about 50 times. Just, bit of training may need to go on there, that police department.
Henry Lee Lucas apparently said it was the only woman that he ever loved about Becky, and they started this relationship, and then him and Ottis sort of went their own separate ways after that. But Becky, there's some heartbreaking stuff about... Because she just sort of went round with him, and they basically drifted and stayed in chicken coops and all sorts. She would give herself tests. So she would give herself, like, maths tests. They found these maths books where she would give herself tests, get all the answers wrong, and then she'd mark them herself and be like, well done, you're doing really well. And there were little notes in the maths book was like, please don't let these men hurt me, and just, like, really sad, depressing things. And it's like, sad. Please, God, I want to die, and all this kind of stuff. But, like, it almost picks up for her, because as they're drifting, they turn up at this woman's house called Kate Rich.
And Kate Rich what's happened is Kate Rich's relatives have said to... This is the strange thing. Said to Henry Lee and Becky, oh, do you want to come and look after our elderly mother? She's 82 and lives in Texas. So they go... I mean, you've seen this one-eyed drifter and this poor girl who's not the sharpest.
Yeah, who's got a retarded girlfriend of 13.
Come and look after my mother. So... She's 80... Man, it'd be cheaper than a retirement home, I guess. So she's 82, and they go and live with her to look after her.
He's meant to be like a handyman and things.
Yeah, but they start apparently allegedly cashing checks on her account and things like that, and the family are really pissed off.
Yeah,
as you would be.
They're charging her for work that they never do on the house as well.
And then they go... then they do a runner again. And then they go on the road for a bit with a priest, don't they?
So what they do is they sign up to this weird cult called the House of Prayer. So they leave Kate Rich behind, and it's sad because Kate Rich hated Henry Lee, but really liked Becky, so kept her around because she's like, oh, I want to make sure this poor kid's all right. But then they do a bunk off to this cult, and they end up living in a chicken shed, and Becky's like, I hate it here, can we go back to Florida? And he's like, oh, for fuck's sake. So they go off and they stay in like a sort of like a homeless camp, and apparently that is where he then fell out with Becky and killed her, because her body was found around there. And
not only that, he then goes back and kills Kate Rich.
Yeah. Also, he confesses and then retracts, but he apparently had sex with Becky's corpse as well. She phoned the House of Prayer and was like, "What's happened to Becky?" And they were like, "Oh, well, they both went off to go back to Florida." Florida? That sounds like a delicious low-fat spread. They went back to Florida, but then he came back on his own and said Becky had gone off with a truck driver, and straight away Kate Rich was like, well, that's fucking shit, he's killed her.
Yeah, because truck drivers are scary as well. You'd be worried if she had gone off with a truck driver.
Yeah.
Like, oh, she's either with him or she's with a truck driver.
Yeah, there's no good outcome.
This is not good.
So she was like, no, he's killed her. He got wind of this and then went and killed Kate Rich.
God.
Which is just horrible. And then he was eventually sort of, all this caught up with him, didn't it? And he was arrested.
Yeah, he was arrested for unlawful possession of a firearm in 1983. But this is when they arrested him, and he was in custody, and he claimed he was treated very badly.
He apparently had 4 days of no sheets, no cigarettes. He was kept naked. He wasn't allowed to speak to a lawyer at any time. And then that's when he confessed to the murders.
Yeah.
After 4 days isn't very long, though, is it?
Not really, no.
What would they have to do for you for 4 days to make you confess?
Maroon 5.
Maroon 5, non-stop. Just that first album.
Oh, just half an hour of that. I'm like, yes, everything was me. I would be confessing. Moves like Jagger, please. It's so embarrassing. Oh, God, it makes me embarrassed thinking about it.
So he confessed to all these murders, although he couldn't ever take them to the bodies. He was just like, yeah, no, I did this one, but he couldn't take them to where the bodies were. And this is where it all starts, doesn't it?
Weird. Like, everything that... So he's in this prison, confessing to these murders, and then they start trying to give him other things to confess to. But he's in the prison, and he's been treated extremely well.
Especially for someone who's had such a shit life. So he quite liked the treatment he was getting. So he got as many cigarettes as he could smoke, and loads of coffee, which were like, other than booze and retarded teenagers, two of his favourite things. So the more he confessed to, the better his treatment was. But
he had the codes to like the doors in the prison. He could walk around as he wanted. Like, he had the security. He's like the bloody caretaker or something.
Yeah, no handcuffs. He had the security codes for all the doors. Just used to wander around. They'd take him out to restaurants and all sorts. And they started this. These Texas Rangers started a task force for Henry Lee Lucas, where they would basically interview him, and he'd give like loads of confessions, and then they would clear all them unsolved cases. So after all these confessions, they signed off 213 murders that he, like, in some cases he just couldn't have done, because then they were like, job well done for us, guys.
Because they're flying him from state to state as well to meet all these chief of police people. He's like, he's going round about, he's like Beyonce or something. he's getting like amazing treatment and just going, yep, that was me.
Yeah.
Oh, is that coffee? Thank you very much.
Yeah, he's also wired up on coffee and nicotine. So, but apparently because he claims later on that he didn't want to do any of these when he finally gets a lawyer, and he claims that he didn't kill Becky. Because the forensic evidence for it is inconclusive. They found a skeleton that was of a similar age and height to her, but they don't know if it was her. And with Kate Rich, they found fragments of bones, but again, it was inconclusive.
But the common denominator between the two was him, so I would say,
yeah,
yes,
I'd say so.
I'd say he did those. But he even confessed to a suicide, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, he said, if they make me confess to the one I didn't do, then I was going to confess to everything. So his theory was like, he just confessed to whatever they put in front of him. So he confessed to a suicide, and then the wife got a massive insurance payout, because when it's suicide you don't get it, but if it's murder you do. So she got this massive payout, and the task force that was looking after him decided to hold a celebratory party, and they racked up a bill of $3,000, which back then is even more money, in a Holiday Inn. And they spent that on prostitutes, apparently, and booze, in a Holiday Inn. Like, that's a lot, isn't it?
That is, in a Holiday Inn, yeah.
You could buy a Holiday Inn for $3,000.
You could, definitely, and pay the staff for like 10 years. That is weird. But he's confessing to everything, isn't it?
Yeah, and then this guy turns up called Phil Ryan, who sort of cottoned on that this wasn't, that all this task force, they were given, like, they were local celebrities, and they all got to do bits on TV and things, and he's like, something's not right here. So he started making false crimes to see if Henry Lee Lucas would sort of confess to it. So, yeah, it'd be like, did you kill Mufasa? And he's like, I did kill Mufasa. I threw him into the gorge. I can't lie.
Mr. Burns, did you shoot him? Yes, I did. Phil Mitchell.
But like literally, they would get old photographs from other cases showing them, and he was like, yeah, no, I did this one. I remember, because I remember walking across that bridge, and he would just bullshit.
But he said he was in a cult. It started to get more outlandish, though, didn't it? Because I think he was quite enjoying the attention and enjoying, being around people and stuff like that. And he was saying he was in the cult, the Hand of Death.
Yeah,
cult.
He basically started to be like more, because they're like, no, just a murder, and he's like, I was in a cult, and they're like, ooh, that sounds good. And then he said he was in he was a cannibal. There was with the Hand of Death, and he was paid £10,000 for every assassination that he made. He made snuff films. Apparently, he delivered poison to the Jim Jones in Jonestown before they did the massacre, and also he claimed that he killed a politician.
Yeah, the missing politician. He's not. It's questionable. Let's put it that way. Especially when you consider that one of the murders he was meant to have done, he was actually in Pennsylvania when the murder took place somewhere like Florida or something.
Yeah.
And then there was a woman who is allegedly murdered in Texas, and he was in hospital, wasn't he?
Yeah, so he was meant to have... he was meant to murder someone in Texas when he was actually clocked in for a shift in Pennsylvania, and then he was meant to have killed someone in Oklahoma when he was actually in hospital in West Virginia. So basically, he was fucking bullshitting, and this task force were just taking...
Which going, yep, that'll do.
Yeah, and
That's
they were getting a huge budget for it because there was so much media attention. Ultimately, though, he was convicted of 11, one of which was orange socks.
Orange socks murder. It's just a sad, horrible murder, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
it was basically a Jane Doe, as
Yeah.
they call it, but because she had a pair of... She was wearing nothing but orange socks, she became known as Orange Socks, and she was found in Texas.
So just be careful what you wear if you're going out.
Yeah.
Just
Oh
be
god, I'm
careful.
at shitty knickers.
Shitty knickers.
2012 jeans. So it was on Halloween she was killed, probably hence the colour of the socks.
Yeah.
And
nobody ever claimed and nobody ever knew anything.
So
That's so
sad.
Very sad. But he is alleged to have done this murder, which was in Texas, but there is a signing in sheet from where he worked that said he was at work in Jacksonville in Florida.
Yes.
So how... But they did do a thing, didn't they? They said, well, it was, I think it's something like 10,000 miles or something. Ridiculous.
They were
between
said
the two.
if he drove straight for 7 hours without stopping at 70 miles an hour, he could have done it. And it's like, well, he didn't do it then, did he?
No, yeah,
there's no way.
But he was sentenced to... for that murder, he was sentenced to death.
Because there was a sexual element to it, apparently. And this is in Texas. And the governor of the time was one George W. Bush, who he was basically going to go down for this and obviously going to go to the chair. And up until then, George Bush had never, ever diminished anyone's sentence from death to life in prison. And the first person he did it for was Henry Lee Lucas. He got a stay of execution and it got diminished to life because it kind of came out that they thought he was schizophrenic.
Yep. And also, nothing really adds up.
No.
Yes, he was a murderer, but a lot of this is so vague.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, he did it. There we go. It's very odd. And the fact that he was confessing to things like suicide and stuff like that.
Yes. No, they're just... he's a scapegoat, isn't he? They were, they're trying to pin everything on him and then it makes it look like they're hitting their targets. He's not a good person by any stretch.
No.
But he's not killed 213 people. So we'll chat about Ottis for a bit.
Mm-hmm. Ottis Toole. Another good name, actually.
Yeah, it's
quite
good,
cool,
isn't
it? He was born in Jacksonville, Florida, on the 5th of March 1947. His mother was a religious fanatic.
Tick.
Yep. She used to dress him in girls' clothes and call him Susan.
Tick.
He had an alcoholic father.
Wait. You know what we've decided? We should do. You should do a drinking game, like to make this podcast even more distasteful. That we should just basically have serial killer bingo. So it's like, do a shot every time that their mum's a religious fanatic.
Yep.
Finish your drink if they're into bestiality.
Get yourself another pint if they've got a broom.
So there you go. Tweet us things that you think that we should include in our
do that.
serial killer bingo. Maybe we should get pissed as we do these.
Oh, I think we should. Incest as well. His older sister and his neighbour.
Yeah, he was abused by his sister, by his neighbour, and he had a satanic grandma. That comes up
great,
a few
isn't it?
times, doesn't it?
Adam Sandler in Satanic Grandma.
She used to call him Devil's Child.
Come on.
They're so hack,
It's
innit?
rubbish. Rubbish. Apparently she taught him the art of self-mutilation and grave robbing.
Who knew it was an art?
I know. I'm letting my own secret things come out there. It's an art form.
Mind you, the Arts Council probably would give that
they would.
funding, wouldn't they? All you need to do is paint the room white and bleed in it, and that's enough. Apparently, he had an IQ of 75. Or this has sort of been disputed because he had like dyslexia, ADHD, so that he couldn't have really done the test to any. But he was, let's say, not the brightest bulb, and he also had epilepsy.
And he was sexually aroused by fire.
Yes,
And he was an arsonist.
He also had sex with his dad's mate when he was 5 years old.
Yeah.
So if you're not pissed by listening to all of that,
Yeah.
this is like perfect serial killer material. He was bisexual, but he knew that he was attracted to men at the age of 10. And in fact, he had a sort of a homosexual relationship with a guy in his neighbourhood, they would say, when he was 12. Apparently they didn't have sex, but they did do stuff together.
First base.
First base, just tops, yeah.
Kissing with tops off. Yeah. In the 9th grade, though, he apparently dropped out of school to go to gay bars.
Normally you go, I'm going to drop out of school, I'm going to go to college and get a trade, and you're like, I'm just going to work the gay bars, mate.
Going down Canal Street.
Mind you, it's a living, isn't
You're 15, what are you doing? And he worked as a gay prostitute and all the rest of it. And then he said when he was 14, that's when he committed his first murder.
There was a salesman who was trying to get sex out of him. And he ran him over in his own car.
Which is amazing.
That's fucking brilliant. That deserves Arts Council funding.
Yeah, doesn't it just? That's quite... Ooh. And then he was arrested for loitering.
Which I think is selling your wiener on the side of the road.
Looking for willies.
There was a really funny... there's a very, Texan police officer who was like... Toole is what you would call a big flamboyant homosexual, and then they just cut to an image of him in a cowboy hat. He looks quite normal. He's just wearing a cowboy hat.
Especially for the southern states of America, man in a cowboy hat. Oh, how flamboyant!
But apparently he used to, because he's quite a big lad, he used to dress up as women sometimes. He was sort of a transvestite and deliberately get into fights because they were so close-minded. He'd be like, "Game on! I'm a serial killer, motherfucker. What are you gonna do?" But then he sort of drifted around America, begging and bumming.
Begging and bumming, yeah. That was pretty much it. And then in 1976, he got married to a woman.
Yeah, he went back to Florida in 75, and then he got married to a woman who was 25 years older than him. And after being married for 3 days, left him because she finally realised that he was gay. Presumably walking down the aisle in a wedding dress. Yeah. Didn't catch on.
Picking a fight with a vicar. It's quite interesting. And that's when he started then, after that, met Henry Lucas.
Yep. For Sex in the Soup Kitchen.
Sex in the Soup Kitchen.
To be honest, if they made a film of that, I think that would be much less offensive than the actual Sex in the City.
It probably would be less racist than the last one.
It was unreal, wasn't it?
It was just awful. Awful. I used to watch Sex and the City, and I was like, I quite like this. And then one day I went, whoa. What are these women moaning about?
Oh, God, they fucked me off, don't
and
they?
That was it.
And there's this weird kind of they're such empowered feminists. And it's like, their lives are literally dictated by handbags, shoes, and whether men want to fuck them or not.
That's very true,
It's not some, big feminist story.
No, it's not.
Anyway, I got sidetracked.
Ottis Toole, however. But there's a big murder that Ottis Toole is said to have done, which is quite a famous case in America, which is the Adam Walsh murder.
Which we did, if you haven't listened to it, check out Jeffrey Dahmer, because we mentioned it at the end of the last podcast.
Yep, it's thoroughly depressing.
Oh, God,
so
really
it's
sad.
a 6-year-old boy who was abducted in Tallahassee. Was it Tallahassee?
Tallahassee, yeah.
Abducted.
In a
Sears store, and he was with his mother. And to cut a long story short, what Ottis Toole said to have done is he gets the lad, and he said, what I wanted to do was have him as my adopted son. But unfortunately the boy gets quite distressed and he's crying a lot, and he punches him in the face, this poor kid, and then chops his head off.
Yeah.
Gets rid of the body by burning it somewhere, and then, this is awful, so strap yourself in, forgets that he's got the severed head in his car, and just chucks it out into the...
Oh, we've all done that, haven't we?
Oh, we've all done it.
I drove a cheesecake around for 3 days.
You had that tuna lunch in your car for ages.
It's still there, mate. It's still there.
Tuna lunch.
I've got a tuna lunch, right, that I bought from Bargains about a year ago. That's in my car, because I was like, this will be healthy. And I can't... It looks like cat food on the packet, let alone within it. I can't bear. And now it's constantly in my footwell.
Maybe it's bad luck to take it out. So he throws the poor kid's head in the canal, which is where your tuna lunch should really go. But yeah, this was...
And then 2 fishermen find it, don't they?
Oh, horrible. I mean, it's weird though, because his father, Adam Walsh's father, John Walsh, actually became the presenter of, what's it called? America's Most Wanted.
Yeah, he became a sort of celebrity off the back of this. It's weird. So he confessed... Ottis confessed to Adam's killing, and they did believe him at first because they could see from the kid's head, I was going to say face, let's talk about it in real terms, head, that he had been punched before, and there was a machete found in Ottis's truck. But then the police didn't think that he'd do it, and then they lost the truck.
And then the machete?
They lost the machete. And then, in 2008, police closed the case, okay, because it was still open and unsolved, and they had no more DNA, they had no more evidence, but they decided that Ottis had done it in the end. And in fact, they had less evidence. It sounds so fucking dodgy to me.
Yeah.
You wouldn't believe. And Adam Walsh's father has always claimed all along that it was Ottis who did it. I don't know how he knows that in particular. But yeah, in 2008, case closed with no further evidence.
He said an interesting thing, John Walsh, about it was because he speaks about, you know, crime and things like that, and victims of crime, and he said something like he caused a bit of controversy because he said at a function, I think we should put exploding things up sex offenders' bums, and then, like, when they leave a certain area, it just explodes. That'll stop them. And then he went, and everyone went, "What is wrong with you?" And he's like, "It was a joke that nobody got."
That's so weird.
Don't be trying out new material at a fucking conference, mate. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
tried and tested. Gig. Yeah, tried and tested.
Stick to your gold, mate.
For survivors of abuse, do not do that. It was a joke. Nobody got it.
He said something else weird, didn't he?
He's a bit of a strange... Oh, it was about women. He said women never hire a male babysitter because it was something like, you know, if you've got a dog or something, a poodle is going to bite you. It won't bite you, but something else. A Doberman will. Let's be honest, men are more likely to abuse your kids.
Fucking hell.
All right.
Yeah.
Chill out, John.
I think he's a bit of a crazy. But then I suppose having your child abducted doesn't make for the most sane person.
No, he's got a right to be peeved.
So Adam Walsh is sort of like the big case in Ottis's career. We're saying that.
Career.
And apparently Ottis Toole accompanied Henry Lucas on sort of like 108 murders, he claimed. And they caught up with him in 1983. He was on an arson charge, actually, because in 1982 he burned down George Sonneberg's house, and George was inside at the time. And he was sentenced to death in 1984. And then during that, he was found guilty of the murder of Ada Johnson, who is a 19-year-old. And then he appealed both of these, and he got them reduced from a death sentence to a life imprisonment because he was diagnosed with sort of schizophrenia and all sorts. And so he had life in prison. And then during prison, though, nice little fact, he was incarcerated in the cell opposite Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
So that's a good little thing. I wonder what it's like when serial killers like bump into each other.
Wow.
Yeah. It must be like, you know, because like female comics don't really gig on the same bill together because they only book one, don't they? So it's like, hello, how are you doing?
This is nice.
Are you keeping busy? Doesn't look like it, does it? Because we're both doing this shit gig in Poynton on a Thursday. So he confessed to 4 more murders while he was in prison. And then he died in prison. He died in 1996. He was 49 years old, and he died of liver failure. And no one came to collect his body, so he was buried in the cemetery of the prison. So that's the end that he came to.
Well, Henry Lee Lucas as well, he died in prison of just heart failure. And he is buried in an unmarked grave in a cemetery.
Ugh.
Yeah.
In thousands of years' time, though, they're going to build over this stuff because they're not going to know it was there. And they're going to have the most fucking haunted floating office blocks with, you know, transportation beams in them that you've ever fucking seen. Like, there's just so much bad vibes there, aren't there?
Totally.
So this spree that they went on, we've sort of glazed over a bit, but they were generally like living like the natural born killers. So apparently, whilst together, they used to sort of rob shops and banks, and they started to get more and more confident and also more keen to kill. So, for instance, it was a convenience store. They robbed it. It was a female clerk. So Henry Lee Lucas said, "Listen, if you scream or anything like that, I'm going to shoot you." And he tied her up and put her in the back. And then Ottis was emptying the till. And then they were counting the money. And when they were counting the money, they saw that she had loosened her ropes. So Henry Lucas went back and shot her. And then apparently Ottis Toole had sex with her dead body.
Oh.
And when recounting this story, Henry Lucas said, "See, that's the difference between me and Ottis. He just kills them when he feels like it. At least I warn him first." Oh, well, you are a knave, sir.
What a difference there.
Yeah.
Such a gentleman.
And apparently there's another story of them picking... There was 2 like a young couple that were driving. They'd run out of gas. They were on the side of the road. So they get out, shoot the guy 9 times, put the girl in the back of the car, and Henry Lucas is raping her in the back of the car. It's fucking horrendous. And then Ottis starts to get jealous of this, so pulls her out the car and shoots her 6 times. They just seem like utterly like this is what happens when 2 crazies come together.
They're utterly mental.
But it's weird because Henry Lee Lucas has got this kind of like, I don't know, because even when I was reading it, I was like, oh, it's shit because he got really abused by the police and things. I'm like, no, he's no saint. Like, he didn't kill 213 people, but he fucking brutalised loads of them.
Yeah,
and
he certainly killed at least 3.
Yeah, definitely.
At least.
Well, because when they went through and looked through all the cases, they were like, well, there's at least another 3 that he definitely did here. That, like, he was in the area, he got everything kind of right.
It's just when people go on about fate as well. Oh, it's fate. You're going to meet someone, it's fate. The fate in this, I'm telling you, for 2 people as mad as each other to meet and go on these and commit these crimes.
Yeah.
That's bad, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like us finding out that we both like serial killers.
Yeah.
What were the chances? No, it was. I remember being in green rooms. I would said something about it, and someone was like, "Mate, you should talk to Rachel Fairburn." It's like she's an expert on this kind of shit.
And the rest is history.
And now Rachel's patio's full, isn't it?
Yeah, completely.
So those are the 2 horrors that are Ottis Toole and Henry Lee Lucas. You can, because they're quite contemporary cases again. You can see loads of interviews with Henry Lee Lucas because he was in prison for so long, and he was like a celebrity. So you should check them out.
He stacked it on in prison as well.
Oh my god,
he was eating well, wasn't he?
Yeah, they weren't starving him. He wasn't on fucking bread and milk there. No, he was a fat fuck. No wonder he died of heart failure. So that's been then. That's episode 11. I hope you enjoyed it. And thanks for all the nice things you keep saying. Apparently you really enjoyed the Dharma episode, which is lovely. Please leave a nice review of us on iTunes, and feel free to follow us on Twitter at KillNoFillPod. And who are we going to do next time?
Ivan Milat.
Yeah, that's the Wolf Creek guy, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the like backpacker outback murderer.
Oh god, it's so scary because it's like in the desert, no one can hear you scream, and if they can, they've probably got a boner over it because they're all fucking weird out there. So we're going to be doing Ivan Milat. We've also got some live shows coming up at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. We should give you a heads up about what we're doing there. But thanks very much for listening.
Thank you.